Hey, what's happening, everybody? It's Robert Phoenix broadcasting to you live from Fredericksburg, Texas for tonight's YouTube live stream. Today's Earth Day, right? Here's to the Earth. L'chaim. Hi, Sally. Earth Day. What's going on out there? Another wild and woolly week. Hi, Dawn. Dawn has arrived. Out in the multiverse. Hello, Charlotte. Charlotte. Nice to see you. I'm just going to kind of wrap until people show up tonight. Let me give you kind of what we're going to be talking about and covering. I went and saw A Quiet Place last night, and wow, what a movie! What a movie! So tonight we're going to look at John Krasinski's chart, and to some extent Emily Blunt's chart, because there's some very interesting things going on, particularly for Emily Blunt as it relates to the movie. And then we're going to get into John Krasinski's chart to show you, or I want to show you, as an example of living the chart and how somebody with his chart, who basically has the chart of a householder, and when you see his chart, you'll know what I'm talking about. How somebody who has a chart of a householder can be very effective in the world. So, what I want you to do, if you can manage this, is go to, we're going to use a different website tonight. Go to astrotheme.com, ASTROTHEME.com, astrotheme.com. And if you go there, you can actually type in John Krasinski's name. And that's Krasinski, John Krasinski. And you'll be able to see his chart. And Emily Blunt has a chart there as well. But there's no time associated with it. We can still look at her chart because there are certain planets that are in play, especially Venus. She's got a very, very interesting chart. So we're going to take a look at both of their charts, and particularly Krasinski. Has anybody seen A Quiet Place yet? Has anybody seen it? The surname is John, John. Here he is. He always does this. He always does. John Krasinski, Krasinski. John Krasinski. He was Jim on The Office. If you need to look up his spelling of his name, just look up Jim from The Office, and you'll see his. You can go to Astrotheme. Seeing this week, glad you have approved. Yeah, yeah, you're going to see it. It's a great movie. It's an absolutely great movie. Lori, we're just starting to crank things up. You haven't missed much, but I'm going to look at John Krasinski's chart tonight. He's Jim from The Office. And if you go to astrotheme, all one word.com, and search for his chart, you'll find it. I'm going to put his name in the text box here. John Krasinski. And then the website is Astrotheme, because you'll be able to find his chart there. Kind of an interesting website if you haven't found it out yet or discovered it yet. And his wife is Emily Blunt. And you can find her chart there without the time. It's worth actually looking at, because there's some really interesting astrological stuff going on with her chart and the movie. So go ahead and check that out. In the meantime, I'm going to punch up the chart of the moment and we're going to see what's going on there. By the way, I have a review of the movie on my website, and I go into it in pretty great detail. It's a really fascinating movie. Really, really fascinating. It is. Hey, hi, Megan. It is really. I don't know. It's really interesting from a storytelling perspective due to the lack of dialogue and the way that they actually take visual pieces and then put them inside of the story, the narrative, so you get to pick up pieces of the movie along the way. It's very, very effective, incredibly effective. And I would have to say that in many regards, this is a really anti Hollywood movie. About the only CGI that you get are the aliens who are on the prowl. That's about the only. Everything else is, for the most part, pure analog, pure film, great lighting, really terrific lighting. Just all in all, a tremendous, tremendous movie. And then we're going to get into some of the astrology of the movie and how it relates, especially to Emily Blunt. This film is going to catapult Emily Blunt's career into a whole new stratosphere. She's obviously a pretty well-known actress and has acted in a lot of movies that have been pretty popular. But this is going to take her to a whole other level because of the astrology that's showing up right now. So let me go into the chart of the moment. Where are we? Where the hell are we? Let's see what we got here. Okay. Oh, this is interesting. Yeah, very interesting. I'm just looking at an article on astrology.com or astro.com. All right, so let me punch up the chart of the moment. Let me change my reference place. I've always got to do that. So the reference place is going to be, let's just put it Austin. Easy. All right. By the way, has anybody seen what's going on with Alex Jones lately? Has anybody been clocking Alex Jones? Wow. Can you say wow? So I'm gonna look at his chart for a second. I'm gonna see if I can actually bring some clarity to what's going on. You know, do I think Alex Jones is Bill Hicks? No, I don't. I used to. I don't think he's Bill Hicks. Do I think Bill Hicks is dead? I'm not sure about that, to be honest with you. Although I will say that Bill Hicks, I did talk to Bill Hicks's mother one time on the phone back around 1990. What was that? 94. Let's see. And sounded to me like she was pretty convinced that he was dead. Oh, it wasn't for anything nefarious, by the way. It was due to the fact that I was working for a company and I was trying to get some unpublished recordings, comedy recordings of Bill Hicks and a bunch of other people who were part of that Sacred Cow collective that Kevin Booth is a part of, Joe Rogan's a part of. I don't think they're doing that thing anymore, but that was a long time ago. Anyway, I talked to Bill Hicks' mom. Is that proof that he didn't die? I don't know. But she was a lovely lady, though. Lovely lady. Says here Alex Jones is 5'10". This is on his Infowars.com. This is on his Infowars.com page. Oh, okay. And his new wife is not up there. That's interesting, don't you think? It's got Kelly Nichols, aka Kelly Jones, who is going after him with as much ferocity as anybody else these days. But his new wife, Rebecca Wolf, she's not there. Okay, so let's see. We got February 11th. So if you're not familiar with what's going on with Alex Jones, he's being sued up the yin yang by a bunch of people. The latest being the two separate parents from Sandy Hook. So he was born February 11th, theoretically, 1974. Although we'll just play with this. Because if he's adopting that identity, right, if he's adopting this birth date, then I think he's going through some kind of astrological connection with the birth date. Okay? All right. So February 11th, that means his son is at 21. 21 Aquarius, theoretically. And his moon would be in Libra. Doesn't seem like he's got a Libra moon. It's a little too fiery for that, but let's roll with it anyway. Okay. What else does he have? Venus in Pisces, Mercury in Pisces. You know, that would actually make sense because he actually has an incredible memory. And people that have Mercury in the water signs have very retentive memories, almost photographic in some ways. Venus in Capricorn, Mars in Taurus. Yeah, that kind of makes sense, right? Mars and Taurus. I mean, he's kind of bull-like, right? Saturn in Gemini. So he's going through. Again, this is just based on the birth date that I have for Alex Jones, right? Whether or not it's a birth date or not, this is actually the day that is right there on his InfoWars page. So in December, he went through the Saturn opposition. And when the Saturn opposition occurs, which happens 3 times pretty much in a person's life, unless they get up to what, 107, then they'll go through the 4th Saturn opposition. Happens between 14 and 15, at 34, 35, and then at around 74, 75, right around there. And then the next would be what, 104, 105. Okay. So when the Saturn opposition takes place, it's a really powerful time in a person's life, especially those first 2 cycles. The third, if you're somebody who's in a seat of power and you go through that 3rd Saturn opposition, get ready to be knocked off the mantle or knocked off the top of the pyramid. And that is where Donald Trump is headed with the 3rd Saturn opposition. And if he's not knocked off the top of the pyramid, then he's going to have to reinvent himself for a 3rd time, because he's already reinvented himself twice. The first was his role and identity as a swashbuckling, dynamic, take no prisoners, art of the deal, real estate mogul in New York City. Which is, if you understand the game, if you understand the real estate game, the image that Trump put out there was a lot more revolutionary and rebellious in many ways than people might understand. because for the most part, and again, I'm not into some kind of, broad brush labeling. Okay. I'm not dealing out a cliche here, but if you look at the New York real estate market, the majority of the real estate market is handled and run by very powerful Jewish real estate brokers. Now, of course, Trump had ties to all of them. He had to. He was doing business with them. He was borrowing money from them. So let's be clear that Trump was in the network. But the image that he put out was, hey, look at this guy in a world known for really, for all intents and purposes, Jewish dominance in New York City. Trump stood out. And that added, whether you were able to, see that in the context of everybody else that was making a ton of money in New York, real estate wise or not, or you could somehow intuit it. So he stood out. But there are people who have done Trump's genealogy, and there's a pretty good chance that he might not even be what he says. Nobody really is, right? Nobody really is. There are people that have traced his lineage back to Germany, where it's connected up with German Jewish families. And you can figure that out on your own. And I'm not making any kinds of assertions or trying to, slam Trump. I'm just giving you information. Okay, just giving you information. I'm giving you the sort of the rabbit hole. All right. Um, but that said, he, that was part of his image. And then once that was kind of done, he recast his image again as a reality TV star. I mean, the Apprentice was enormous. It was huge. Like, it was crushing the competition. I mean, it was the perfect vehicle for Trump and his family and all these celebrities and wannabe CEOs, who became celebrities. I guess maybe the most famous would be Omarosa, right? Um, but there were others. There were some interesting people that kind of came out of that experience. So then he rebranded himself again. He recreated himself 3 times. Now, these do not, as president of the United States, these do not correspond with the Saturn opposition. But I'm just giving you sort of the arc of Donald Trump as he's been able to recreate himself over the course of his career. When we saw him as the star of The Apprentice, did we see him as a real estate mogul? To some degree. But what we saw him in that series was somebody who was running a company. He was running, he was a CEO, and he's giving people opportunities and mentoring them, tutoring them, whatever. So it was definitely kind of a shift. And of course, now he's in the real reality TV series known as The Presidency. But let's get back to the Saturn opposition, because I got to Trump vis-a-vis the next Saturn opposition that is coming up for him, which is not that far away. I think it's what did we say last time? It's 2020. It's like right at the end of 2019, beginning of 2020. It's a big time for him, really big time. And at that age, when you get to 74, which is where he's going to be, it's not like when you're at 34, or sorry, not like when you're at 44 and you go through the first Saturn opposition. When you go through the first Saturn opposition, you still have men and women, a fair amount of energy, a fair amount of fortitude, some ambition, some desire. Your body is still, pretty well intact. So that Saturn opposition can be a really powerful pivot for a person's life at that time. At 74, the pivot might be, right out of public life or right out of the career space and retirement. Okay. So just to give you an example of what my life was like during the Saturn opposition, which happened when I was 44, my son was born. That's what happened. My son was born. And one of the key things for people, we have to talk about people now. with the Saturn opposition at 44, because if you go back in time, let's rewind this thing. Let's go to 1960, okay, or 1964, 65. You know, pre Aries, pre Chiron and Aries, first wave feminism. What did we have? Well, we had men mostly working, women mostly at home, right around that time. And it's true. And what happened was during the Saturn opposition, which would happen at 44, is that a man would go through this midlife crisis at 44. And sometimes it would come out with an affair. That would be one kind of manifestation of it. There are a few other aspects that maybe we'll get into that next week, but there are a few other aspects that kind of go along with that. That's a big one. That's a big one. And if they don't have an affair or congruent to an affair, either, it can go either way, then what would happen is that, or what does happen, of course, I'm talking man circa 1965, is that he'd be at the height of his earning power. And that may not be satisfactory for him, especially if there's no chance of real upward mobility. So then what will happen is that he would then try to do something different and recreate his life. Okay. Which means that he would leave his job, maybe do something entrepreneurial. Maybe he would, and that's usually the case, by the way. It's like, I'm going to take this on. I'm going to do something more meaningful. And in many cases, that can be entrepreneurial. In some cases, it can be a father late in life. That's what happened to me. But clearly, there's going to be a shift, a tidal shift that happens at 44, 45, okay? You go back to 1965 and you look at, well, where were women, by and large, I'm talking United States, I'm not talking about the whole wide world, I'm talking about the United States, maybe parts of Europe. But what happened for women during that time is that, by and large, if people started having kids around 21, 22, 23, which is not out of the question, then generally one of those kids, or maybe all the kids, who knows, that they begin to leave the household at that time, right around 44, 45. And then all of a sudden now the woman in that particular manifestation of the universe based on the social picture would find herself at home alone, right? So now you got a guy who is trying to find more meaning in his life. And then now you have a woman who is an empty nester trying to find meaning. Does she go back to work? Does she go to work? What does she do? This was the common theme for a long time with the Saturn opposition. But it changed. It totally changed because we have women moving into the workforce and they're going through similar experiences as men did, say, 40 years ago, right? Which would be, or 45 years ago, roughly, right around 1965. Because things accelerated. So now both, people will go through, or both sexes will go through that transformation and that change or that pivot that happens with the Saturn opposition. And it can be very difficult, by the way, for women who have not had a domestic life and did not have children prior to the Saturn opposition. I'm just being straight up. Because all of a sudden, they could be going through this crisis like, holy shit, I put my life on hold, did all these things, didn't have kids, I was going to be independent. This is not a one-size-fits-all deal, but it is not uncommon. And then they realize that all of a sudden they've lost all this time, and it's, they look at their watch, it's like, wow, I missed it. And that can be devastating. That Saturn opposition for women can be really devastating if they have not had some kind of connection to their feminine essence or their feminine energy. Not in all cases, okay? This is not a one-size-fits-all deal. But I've seen it. I've seen it with clients, and it happens. So now they've got to figure out, well, where do they get meaning from? And you can, at that point, you can see women like, maybe, I don't know, adopting kids or, they may quit their jobs and try to find something more meaningful during that time. Who knows? Maybe for other women, it's just like, pedal to the metal. Let's go. I'm losing time here. I mean, but by and large, this is what happened. So for me, I was going through that Saturn opposition in 44. And I was at that time, I was kind of at my earning potential. I think I was making around 98K a year. I made a little bit more after that, like about 2 years after that, because I went back into the game. Wasn't a really great thing. So yeah, I made more than that, but I think that was my peak, about 98K, which to me at the time was, it was fine. It's great. So I left that job. I left being in that place for 5 years. Company was moving to New York City, and I was offered a job, but I was not going to be a part of a restart, which is really what it was. And just had a kid. So I said, no, we're not going to go to New York, as much as I love New York, because at that time, my ex and I were both kind of workaholics, type A types. And trust me, New York is the devil's playground for me. So I didn't really even trust myself in New York City. It was like, it might have been a bit much, to be honest with you. So we stayed, and I left, and I became a stay-at-home dad. I had Saturn going through my 8th house in what sign? Cancer. I became a stay-at-home dad. It was a very difficult transition. I have to tell you, that was a tough one for me, especially because the company I was working for had a big infusion of cash. And I'll never forget, March Madness comes on, and they're advertising all over March Madness. Here I am, just wanting to lose myself, in a freaking basketball game. And I'm seeing the company's logo spin on all these courtside banners. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. And they even had commercials on TV. So I was really going through that. Not only was I going through the Saturn opposition, I was going through a Saturn transit of the 8th house. And that, by the way, boys and girls, that's a death. When you go through Saturn in the 8th house, you're going through the dark lands, okay? You're on a shamanic journey into the underworld, your shadow, your psyche, your fears. You get to like sort through that for however long that transit is, usually about 2.5 years. And if you've got planets there, which I do, out of Saturn-Mars conjunction, right out of the gate, talk about frustrated. Wow. When you have a Saturn-Mars conjunction, you get a lot of work done. But if you're not focused, it's like hitting the gas and the accelerator and the brake simultaneously with a Saturn-Mars conjunction. You got Saturn-Mars, Saturn transiting Mars through your chart. It's like burning rubber. You better have a plan, and you better be working on something. In which case, Saturn-Mars, you can work diligently, and you can get a lot done during that period of time. You can focus, be disciplined, right? That's part of understanding the chart. That's part of, living with the chart, learning with the chart, navigating through the chart. Right? It's a very important exercise. Really important. Know where your strengths are and go with them. It's very key, very critical. So that Saturn transit went through my 8th house, and I've talked about this. It's actually kind of a teaching experience that I share with people, is that I had to go back in time to a point in my life where I had an event that I had organized, and it got away from me. And I was like 20. What was I at that? I was around 21, I think. And I was really talented, and really fucking cocky. I was really cocky. And I did not have the kind of the wherewithal or the endurance to follow something through. I was young, I was green. And so this event was successful, but it got out of control. And I kind of, it really was a big moment in my life, to be honest with you, because I was doing TV broadcasting. I had a major falling out with TV broadcasting and my teacher and the multimedia, the media director of the school, and all that stuff. It was a heavy deal. So what happened was I had a conversation with Paul Horn. Some of you might know who Paul Horn is. He's a flute player, a sax player. He's still alive. And he had the most successful New Age selling record of all time, I think, for quite a while. I think somebody might have displaced him at some point. But Inside the Taj Mahal is generally considered that and Music for Zen Meditation with Tony Scott are considered the two first New Age records. So I interviewed Paul Horn. I had a little side gig. I was doing some writing, and I knew a lot about Paul. He did Inside the Taj Mahal. He did Inside the Great Pyramid, Inside the Wall of China. He had a whole Inside series. So I interviewed him. It was a great interview, and I asked him. I said, "Hey, Paul, how would you like to play Grace Cathedral?" Which is a great ambient cathedral in San Francisco. And he said, "Yeah, sure, it'd be great." So that's it. I produced this concert with Paul Horn at Grace Cathedral. It was a lot of money. I had a lot of money on the line, but I every single day I said, "I am not going to be a failure. I'm not going to be a failure. I'm not." I didn't say I'm going to be a success. Sometimes when you say I'm not going to be a failure, it's very motivating. Okay, it's very, very motivating. And I don't care what people say, like, "Well, you really, really should be saying, I am going to be a success. I am a success," right? Sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes looking and staring failure in the face and saying, "I'm not going there," can be really motivational. Okay. So every single day I got up. This is going through the Saturn 8th house transit, right? I got up and I'm like, what can I do to make this event a success? And I did not leave any stone unturned. I would go out to concerts and I would hand out cards to people about the concert. Hey, here we go. Here, I was my own street team. I would take my kid around to the various stores and we'd put up flyers. And then, ironically enough, I ran into a guy that was part of my event when I was 21, and it was at the same junior college that I went to where the event had taken place. He was on the crew. I brought Paul down there for an interview. He said, "Hey, man, I remember you." And we even talked about the event. And the concert was a success. I broke even. Paul got paid. People were happy. We got a recording out of it. And then I wound up actually getting another gig out of the deal. But that's the Saturn opposition, right? And I had to recreate myself. Now the recreation didn't really come full circle until Saturn began to hit my midheaven. That's when the astrology stuff kicked in. I had to go through a whole Saturn Leo cycle between the 8th house and the 9th house. And sometimes it's not that difficult. You get into the 9th house with Saturn and you're creating new structures around your belief system, creating new structures of faith, whatever's going on with Saturn in the 9th house. And at that time, I was going through a very difficult time with my father, who happened to be a Leo. And that's what my 9th house is. So here you have Saturn going up through the 9th house. What house is that? It's Leo's house. Of course, you're going to have challenges with Leo people. That's Saturn going through the Leo part of your chart. It's going to happen. Now, I have Uranus in Leo and I have Pluto in Virgo. So I had a Saturn-Uranus conjunction. And that was happening right around the same time I was going through my Chiron return. Very, very close. And then shortly thereafter that, Saturn hit my Pluto, and guess what happened? My father died. Now, this is not everybody's, how-to book for astrology, but I can show you my chart, and I can clearly show you from the Saturn opposition through the transit through the 8th to getting up to the 9th, the challenges with the father, and all that stuff. That was all part of my Saturnian passage, okay? Bringing this back to Alex Jones, which is where we started this. He's going through, based on this birth time, he's going through the Saturn opposition. And it's in what? Gemini. Okay. What does Gemini do? It communicates. Gemini communicates. Of course it communicates. What's interesting is that Alex's south node, again, if this is his chart, Alex's south node is on his Saturn because he's got his true node in what? Sagittarius. His true node is conjunct the galactic center. That is, if this is true, right? It is a heavy true node to deal with. It's a lot of responsibility with the true node at 27. Where is it? 26. 26 still conjunct. And it's retrograde. So what has he done? Right? Well, he's basically said that Sandy Hook was fake. And he said it. No matter what he says on his show, he said it. There's video out there. Okay? And now he's being sued by the parents, which is interesting, right? Which is two. He's getting sued by both parents. So we're talking a little Gemini action here, right? And it's about what? A school. And what does Gemini rule? It rules like early childhood learning pretty much through junior high school, middle school, and for the most part up till high school, right? Is this a trip or what? So what he did the other day, I guess it was Friday, I mean, he basically begged for these parents to take the suit back. That the $1 million that he's going to have to pay out is going to each of them is going to ruin him. And this is completely bizarre. It's totally bizarre. He's got his Chiron and Aries, and Alex is going to have to figure this thing out. He also has Jupiter? He's got Jupiter and Aquarius. That actually makes sense. Jupiter and Aquarius conjunct Sun in Aquarius 21, 23, because he's big, right? He's wide. And then he's got Neptune also in Sag. What's going on here? Where's Capricorn in Alex Jones's chart? Well, it's on Black Moon Lilith. Well, it's not there yet. Not there yet. It will be at the end of next year. That'll be very interesting to see if his current wife actually stays with him with that Saturn transit over Black Moon Lilith in his chart. That'll be very interesting for Mr. Jones. I think the big thing really too is the Saturn-Pluto square. He's got Pluto and Libra, which is what? Libra's balance, scales, adjudication, the scales of justice. Here comes Saturn. Bang! Slicing his Pluto. Alex Jones has got to do something different. He's got to do something different. I'm telling you right now, Alex Jones needs to leave InfoWars. He needs to leave. He needs to take a break from InfoWars. He needs to go off and write some books or something. He needs to get out of the public limelight, turn InfoWars over to Paul Joseph Watson, turn it over to whoever, right? And then have somebody else run the show. Owen Schroyer, I like the kid, but he can't hold InfoWars down. You need somebody who is crazy and is charismatic and is willing to sell their soul as Alex. No, I'm just kidding. But he needs to step away. If he continues to do what he is doing right now, again, based on this chart, he's not going to make it through the Saturn opposition. He will not. He's got to focus on something different. And it's difficult. You get used to something. When I was living the high life and flying around the world and signing bands and signing labels, man, it was freaking great. Are you kidding me? It was fantastic. And then I had a really, cushy job. It's like I got to ride, and it was a pretty sweet deal. And then when I had to say goodbye to that stuff, man, that was hard. I had to deconstruct, and contract. But ultimately, look, if that didn't happen, I wouldn't be talking to you tonight, whatever that means for you. Okay. It means a lot to me. But if I hadn't made, I seriously doubt that my mission would have forked off in this direction. So that's what he's going through. Let me just check in with you guys, see where you're at with everything. We got 42 people. Old Max and no mun, no fun, laugh out loud. Did you see his interview? The interview with his ex-wife? No, I a little bit. I'm not a fan of the ex-wife. I'm not a fan of the ex-wife. I think he cannot like talk about his arrangement with her or his marriage with her, anything, and yet she does with him. And I don't necessarily think that's fair. Does she have a point on some of her stuff? Of course she does. Of course she does. Saturn opposing what? Saturn opposing natal Saturn. Okay. You wanted to hear her side? I think she's got some things to say. I also think she's bitter and scorned. Look, it's an issue that's a little too close to home for me. So I can't be objective. And I'm not supporting Alex Jones because I think Alex he's got Saturn and Gemini. There's two sides to Alex Jones, obviously, right? So anyway, you can hear her side of this. I'm sure there's some truth in there. But it's like, I don't know. I get life, right? Like she's now on a mission. And she's using what had happened with her husband, and she catapulted, what happened to her. So now she can be this advocate. I get it. I totally get it. I don't know why I'm breaking up. Oh, I know why I'm breaking up. Hold on. You know why I'm breaking up? Sorry about that. I'm doing this in another part of my place. And usually I jack right into the Ethernet cable, but tonight I didn't because I just wanted to be in a different part of the universe while I did this tonight. Okay. And I look, and I get it, right? This is what people do. They have an experience. It's like, okay, I've tasted, I bit into this apple and the fruit is really bitter. I get it, right? So what do you do about it? Well, you can say, well, I don't want other people to bite into the bitter fruit of this apple. So I'm going to go out and I'm going to tell people about the bitter apple. And I think that there's some merit to that, right? I think there's some merit to it up to a point, and then there are other times where it's just like total grandstanding and taking advantage of, I don't know, it feels at times a bit disingenuous, just a bit disingenuous. And I do think she has a gripe, by the way. You know what I think her real gripe is? I think her gripe is, and I know this for a fact because I went through the very same court system in the same county as Kelly Jones or Kelly Nichols or whatever her name is. Went through the same court system. And by and large, that court system chews up men and spits them out. Trust me, it's what happens. And Alex got through the court system and managed to have total visitation rights with his kids. Like he became the de facto parent and they were with him all the time. Okay. Now, the only time I think stuff like this actually happens is when you're really connected. And how those connections occur, they occur through what? Secret societies. They occur through, fraternal orders. Trust me. It's the only way, generally speaking, you can get stuff like that, to take place because I was in the same court system, same county, and, the hierarchy, women, men. Sorry, it's the way it is. I went through it. Okay. So, and what's really interesting too is like if you go back in time and you look at the early days of InfoWars, it's a very different kind of creature. It's a different production altogether. And there was a lot of really, really heavy investment from third-party sponsors, third-party people, and they all come out of a really wealthy strata of the Jewish manufacturing, money, media community. And I'm not going all David Duke here. It's true. I know who was running those programs. I know who was running Alex's sponsorships, and I believe a lot of them were connected to his wife, Kelly. He was also using, at that time, the same lawyer that the Bronfmans use. How do you get the Bronfmans lawyer? right? That's like juice. You have to be connected. You have to be connected. All right. So I've talked enough about Alex Jones, but I think you get my point because of the Saturn opposition. So again, Saturn opposition, natal Saturn. When you go through it, the times are, you know, 14, 34, 74, and 104. When you're 14, what are you separating from? You're separating from your family, right? You're becoming, a teenager, adolescent. So you separate out from your dominant culture and you try to find yourself. That's what happens at the first set. That's why kids are, teens can be very difficult because they're redefining who they are against the dominant structures of their life. Plain and simple. Keep the cat on your lap. I'm trying. You don't know this cat. You don't hear, although maybe you do. He always makes his appearance during the show. This is Jasper. Say hi, Jasper. This is your star moment, Jasper. Yes, this is live now. Definitely live now. Activist musician. MIA had a kid with, that's right, she did. Yeah. My cat is a catkivist. No, he's got to be involved in the truth movement somehow, right? He's got to be. Get out of here now. Now he's rubbing up against us. Okay, enough. Get down. All right, say goodbye. Say goodbye, Jasper. There we go. No doubt he'll be back. What did I say? Okay, you just stay there. All right, let's get it. No, stay there. Let's get into the. What can I say? He's a whiskers guy. He loves to do whiskers. Yes, people love you, Jasper. Okay, go over there. Over there. Go. Jasper will not be denied. Glenn, why do cats love to walk on keyboards? What is up with that? Is it because they're cats? He always shows up, I mean, I could be doing this just sitting here writing. He wouldn't be over here. This is what he does. All right, I got to focus. Okay. No, we're done. I got to focus. Let me get back to the chart of the moment, shall we? Ah, man. Yes, I know. Hey. Maybe he should just have his own YouTube channel. What do you think? Oh, look, the moon is in Leo, of course. Of course the moon is in Leo. We've got Jasper trying to hog the screen here. Got a nice moon Mercury sextile right now. The sun is at 2 degrees Taurus, which means that I'm having a bit of a power struggle with Jasper because the moon and the sun are square, right? I'm Taurus. I'm focused. I'm here trying to get something done. And Jasper just wants to, be a part of the show. So now I'm having a power struggle with Jasper. That's the moon sun square right there in a bit of a nutshell. Okay. Venus is at 28 Taurus, which means it's going to go into Gemini this week. That's always fun, right? The social scene, social activity picks up when Venus is in Gemini. You know what's cool about Venus and Gemini is that it's always going to happen right around this time of year, depending upon where Venus is. It's going to be in May, or sometimes, it's going to be early May, sometimes mid-May, sometimes late May, sometimes even in June, Venus will show up in Gemini. And it's great because that's when the weather is changing. And I know that I think this week or the next week, we're going to have our farmers market open up. And that's great for Venus and locality and getting out in the place that you live. And, finally, hopefully you people up in the north and the northeast, you catch a break with your weather. Holy smokes, man. I mean, you guys have had it rough as we go through these earth changes. Now, come on now, that's a bit much, right? I mean, there's 6 weeks more of weather, and then there's 6 weeks more of, you know, solar dimming. I mean, it's a bit much. So let's hope that springtime kicks into gear here for everybody with Venus and Gemini. You can get out and go to your farmers markets and hang out, meet people, and the musicians begin to start to congregate on the sidewalks again. This is a good time of year. Venus and Gemini is terrific. Venus and Cancer is great. Venus and Gemini is really good again for being social, getting out, breathing that nice chemtrail air. Sorry, and again, being local. Mercury moving forward now. We're not going to be out of the shadow for 12 days, but it's definitely moving forward. You can at least depend on that. Hey, you're going to start the work week off with the moon in Leo. That's a great moon. I love the Leo moon. Even if it is a bit square with the sun, don't worry about it. The Leo moon is warm, it's generous, it's gregarious. Sometimes it's over the top. Who cares, right? In a world full of zombies, over the top is not always that bad. So we got the moon in Leo starting off your work week. Get out there. Open up your heart. Tell people how much you dig them, or be generous. Bring donuts or gluten-free donuts or whatever it is that you do. Bring it. Lighten up the load. Play. Have fun. Right? Leo is a fun sign. It is not a drag. So, lift the energy up a little bit tomorrow. Start the week off right. Every time, there's a reason why it's called Monday. It's Moon Day. So the moon is going to influence that day and the next 6 days until we get to what? Sunday. We've completed the cycle, right? The moon to the sun and the moon to the sun and the moon to the sun. So here we are Sunday, and it's Taurus, and we're grounded, connected. We're going to talk about some Taurus stuff in a minute here. And you've got the moon. The sun is on your side. Let it shine. Let it shine. Okay. We got Venus and Taurus. We talked about the transit to Gemini, which happens this week. And we have Mars in Capricorn. Really slow Mars season. Man, we're going to have Mars between Capricorn and Aquarius between now and October. So whatever house Mars is in your chart, get ready and deal with it, because it's going to be there for a while in most cases. Now, it might ingress and it might get to another house for a little bit, and then back it goes again, into Capricorn. So it's going to be a very slow Mars between Capricorn and Aquarius. Generally speaking, whatever house Mars is in now, maybe a few degrees outside of that house, that's what you're going to be dealing with for the next, where are we? Almost 6, 7, 8 months, right? No, 6 months. It moves out in October. So for 6 months, it's a long time. The end of October, almost 7 months, right? So you better get well acquainted with where Mars is in your chart, and get ready to roll with it. Because Mars in Capricorn is actually it's a great placement for Mars. Again, you can get a lot of work done with Mars in Capricorn. Mars in Capricorn in the 7th house, if it's transiting through your 7th house, you better be working with your partners. The person you live with, the person you love with, the person you do business with. That Mars transit through that house is really important, in terms of being able to deal with people, get on board. That is not the time to fly solo, right? If you have Mars in the 1st house, that's about you. You need to put your energy into you and your projects and your ideas, right? It's real simple. We get into the aspects, and that's where we get into gradations of interpretation, which are important, right? They're important. And the thing that drives people nuts about astrology, and I completely understand, is how you can have one aspect that's positive and another aspect that can be thought of as negative, right? And so the two may cancel each other out at times. But it's also kind of like getting to try something out with training wheels on. You get to try out this new aspect, and you got this other thing going on. So there's like this governor that's taking place, so you don't, accelerate too quickly. There's some integration that needs to take place. And if you understand that, And that's great. Sometimes you get about 3 or 4 things happening simultaneously. Usually during those times, that's when people go through crisis. And when they get into crisis, then and it can be really positive though too. I mean, you get like four really positive aspects that may not be necessarily crisis oriented. I mean, that can be super positive. And then you're off and running. You cover a lot of ground, right? And I've seen people in their charts do that. There are other times where, you've got maybe 4 different aspects going on and, and 2 are positive and 2 are maybe challenging. And the challenging ones are coming from outer planets. And, that's when the gradation of interpretation comes into play. And it's very important to understand those nuances, right? You can learn a lot. I'm learning all the time, trust me. So just remember, wherever Mars is wherever Capricorn is now in your charts, whatever house, it's going to be in that house, and probably, about maybe 10 degrees outside of that house to the next house. And that's it until the end of October. So know where Mars is, and then proceed accordingly. Jupiter's in Scorpio, and it's retrograde. This is a really interesting retrograde because one of the things that I've been going through is I've got Jupiter in my 12th house right now, going retrograde. So I'm going back in time. And I'm looking at choices that I've made with my life. And I would say by and large that those choices are connected to things like resources, which are very scorpionic. Resources I've had, resources I've used, resources I've used wisely, not so wisely, and then the choices that have gone along with those kinds of decisions, right? And I thought about, I've made some really crazy choices in my life. Some of them have been pretty good, and some of them I look back and I scratch my head and I say, well, how did I make that? Generally speaking, there's an astrological reason for it, okay? You can find it in the chart, by the way. But I thought about it, and I thought about the choices that we make. And, life is, it's kind of like art. You make a bad choice sometimes. It's like, you screw up on an art project and you get something out of it. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? I mean, that's like, oh, look, I added orange when I really wanted to add violet here, but man, I really like this orange. It's coming out okay. And, I can go with this. Those things do happen, right? On the surface, it looks like you kind of screwed up, but you go with it. It's like, all right, this will be okay. But that's the artist's way. The artist steps back and doesn't judge, right? Doesn't really judge. But there's a part of us that at times sits in judgment. And then we look at our choices and we go, wow, really all I needed to do was just add purple here. And I defiantly added orange, and I didn't do anything with it. And I kind of messed up this canvas, right? But I thought about this, and I thought about the planet, and I thought about how many people have made, on the surface, bad choices. And I mean bad. I mean, you can make really bad choices in life. Like you could be with the wrong person, and it can set you back for a long time. And sometimes being with the wrong person can redirect you a little bit, and maybe that's not a bad thing, right? Or you can be involved with a substance, and man, that can set you back for a long time. That's a bad choice, but you get through it, and then ultimately you come out the other side, and you've got new people, new connections, and maybe something else that's come out of that. For some people, that's not the case. For some people, they make a bad choice along those lines and never recover. You make a bad choice by joining the army, thinking you're going to get an education, bennies, people are going to look up to you. Next thing you know, you come back with 1.5 limbs. Again, there are things that we can learn from all this stuff. And I'm not saying that bad choices are a death sentence, but I just thought, well, what would happen if we made consistently better choices? What would the world look like if we made consistently better choices? And I think that this is really kind of the key to turning everything around. And unfortunately, as children, what happens is that in many cases, we're not really shown how to make great choices. And in fact, many of us have grown up in environments that have been quite damaging. And we've all had to come through some kind of recovery with those environments. And a lot of our choices were born out of those environments. But wouldn't it be great if we could kind of stop that boulder from rolling down the hill early on? And we were able to instruct our children to find the mechanism inside themselves that allows them to make really empowered choices and to stay away from sort of the pitfalls in life. That doesn't mean that they're going to live a life, in a flame retardant titanium suit. No, that's not it at all. But it basically hedges the potential for them to live healthy, sovereign, well-informed, balanced, loving, integral choices. Wouldn't that be great if we, and it starts with us. It really starts with us. And for a lot of us who are in the chat room right now, we're beyond that stage. A lot of us are either parents or we're beyond parenting or we haven't had kids. But I'm telling you, if we could reverse that current and get kids to ultimately make better choices, in favor of a pattern that's inside of themselves, by the way, which astrology can help illuminate and turn the high beams on, it would help kids. That in a good dose of, good modeling, good parenting, healthy living, healthy lifestyle, and then cutting away the bullshit of the world. Okay. And when I talk about the bullshit of the world, you know what I'm talking about. The stuff that tweaks us so that all of a sudden we're not even making our own choices. Have you guys seen that document that came out of the Freedom of Information request, the FOIA request out of Washington, and how DARPA is like basically, trying to figure out how to mind control everybody? We knew this all along, but then the document comes out. And it's through the cell phones, it's through all kinds. It's really interesting, right? They've got this process for machines called machine learning. And what it is they flood the AI with, 100 different things. And it's not just like, A equals B equals C. It's kind of the old version of cybernetics. But the machine learning floods the machine with all these variables, right? And then the results of machine learning are quite unusual and bizarre. And they find out that AI can do things that they didn't program that machine to do. Well, they're doing it because they're making complex connections between the various points of data. Well, they're doing the same thing with us. We are and have been a part of a machine learning program for decades. Whether it's television, movies, religion, the symbols of our culture, now cell phones, technology, the various trends that they've thrown at us like paint on a canvas. It's all part of a machine learning program for humans. And ultimately, I think it's about dehumanizing us and turning us into soulless and mindless zombies who in many cases think we have a mind of our own, when in actuality, this DARPA program is saying, guess what? You don't. You don't have a mind of your own. I'll never forget the first time I experienced this in my life, for me personally. I was a kid and I watched Death Wish with Charles Bronson. I was so fired up by Death Wish. I went out in the suburbs of San Jose, California, which at that time was middle class. And trust me, there's nobody skulking around the suburbs of San Jose, California at 12:31 in the morning. But nonetheless, my friend and I walked out with our pellet guns, patrolling the streets, just to make sure that we weren't going to run into some New York scum in our neighborhood. So it was really interesting that night is that we actually wound up connecting up with these other guys who were walking around. And they decided they were going to go off and go do some other stuff. And I'd had enough. Turns out that these guys who were walking around hooked up with this other guy. Well, he was already there. And they stole a car that night. They stole a car. I don't know how they stole a car that night. And apparently they got into a chase with the cops, and they reversed the engine and threw the engine and torqued the engine, and the cops went flying past them, and they jumped out of the car and they ran over the fence in the freeway and took off. So in a weird way, right? I actually did encounter something, but I didn't know that was going to happen. And had I known, I don't think that my pellet gun would have stopped that. But it was interesting. It's like at that point, I branched off. I said, I know that's not my choice. I guess I actually made a good choice at that point. All right. Let's say what we're going to do now. Did you guys find John Krasinski's chart? I'm going to check him in the chat. We're going to get into Krasinski. We're going to get into a quiet place. Has everybody found that chart? Heather says, Mars is my boyfriend's 7th house. He's not happy with me anymore. Level out kind of ending. I'm sorry to hear that, Heather. Mars in the 7th house. You got to work with you. You know what happens if you got Mars in the 7th house? You got to have a good sex life. That's really important if you have Mars in the 7th house. You lose a sex life and you have Mars in the 7th house, you're kind of screwed. Because then you start fighting. You got to work together, got to exercise together. You got to have sex together. Hello, Farah Jade. How are you? Welcome to the show. Sally H says true. Sally knows. I was impressed to learn he wrote and directed and stars. Yeah, John Krasinski. John Krasinski is the man. Let me tell you right now. He is the man. So have you guys found his chart? Did you look up his chart? If you've looked up his chart, we'll get into his chart. Okay. So let me give you the premise. I'm going to give you the premise of this movie, A Quiet Place. And I hope not to spoil anything, okay? Now, the premise is that you get dropped right into this movie. This is not a spoiler. You get dropped right into this movie, and the first scene is in a pharmacy. And there's a family walking around the pharmacy. It's completely empty. It's kind of dusty. And there are people walking around their bare feet. And all of a sudden you realize, if you know anything about the movie, you realize that they're quiet. And they're quiet for a reason. But you don't know why, right? And everything sets up in this very first scene of the movie. And then what happens is that there's a connection between the youngest boy and the girl who's in the middle. Click on the face to bring up the chart. So can somebody put the chart for him in the chat room? I'll try it. Let me see if I can find it, bring it in there. Hold on. It's sometimes it doesn't allow me to post in the chat room. Let me see if I can do this. How about that? Okay. So there's John Krasinski's chart. Okay. And then the next chart I'm gonna drop in is Emily Blunt's chart, who is his wife. And I did not know she was his wife. Okay. Did not know that. So here's her chart. So you don't even have to go there. Look at that. Now, the difference between Krasinski's chart and Emily Blunt's chart is that we know his time, we don't know her time, but we'll still be able to gather some information. Okay, so then what happens is that there's a scene in the pharmacy where, and you know what's going to happen. I'm sorry, I'm not going to give you any spoiler here, but a boy, you dropped out, or who knows? Maybe it's you. I don't know. Sometimes it's me. I don't know. Can people still hear me? Hello? Can you hear me now? You dropped all good. Okay, yep. Okay. So there's a girl who's hearing impaired, and she gives her brother, well, the brother goes up to get a space shuttle. Okay. And he almost drops it, and John Krasinski comes flying in and grabs it before it hits the ground. You're like, wow, he really did not want that space shuttle to hit the ground. So he has a little conversation with him and then takes the batteries out and leaves the space shuttle with the batteries on a table. Before they leave, get out of there because they're there for antibiotics. The daughter decides she's going to give the boy the space shuttle as a, here, here's a little toy. Then the boy grabs the batteries. Then they walk out, and then there's a bulletin board in which you see a bunch of missing people. And all of a sudden now, within the first 10 minutes, the stage is set. You know that there's something lurking. There's a sense of foreboding, a little bit of fear, terror at the wing, anxiety. And you see a bunch of missing people. There's nobody around. Within 10 minutes, you've got the movie. Like, it's brilliant, right? It's totally brilliant. Like, there's no dialogue and going back saying, well, a year ago, such and such happened, and these guys came here and all this stuff. There's no unspooling of newsreels or anything. It's brilliant. And then you see what happens. And of course, you have this moment. Like, if you are familiar with Shakespeare, in most movies, there's going to be a scene at the beginning of the movie that cleaves you, right? It cleaves your psyche. Probably the most universal example that I could think of is, what is it? Is it The Lion King, where the parent dies at the beginning of the movie, right? I mean, how many times have we seen this, especially in a Disney film, where the parent dies at the beginning? This goes back to Shakespeare. With Shakespeare, what Shakespeare would do is he would have two characters that would create a dynamic opposition, and which would set a play in motion, and it would split you, the reader, or you, the witness of the play, so that you'd have to deal with two viewpoints and two competing types of morality. And then in that process, Shakespeare would open you up and pour the play in. And this is what happens with movies. At the beginning of a movie, something happens very quickly, usually within the first 5 to 10 minutes, splits you wide open, opens you up psychically, and then the movie is poured in. This is one of the key things for movies. And this is what happens in this film, and it happens to the boy. Okay, it happens to the boy, little boy. I don't want to tell you anything more, but it sets the tone for the rest of the movie. Okay, and what happens with this film, which is really interesting, is it's dystopic, but it has a sense of magic about it. It's really unusual. Like, there's nobody left, and most dystopian films are gritty and gray and bleak and apocalyptic. These people actually have kind of a magical life. There's not that many people around. It's candle lights, it's lantern lights, everything is quiet, and there's kind of this sacred hush, that has fallen over everything. And it's almost enforced due to the fact that if they make a peep, these creatures with very intense hearing, auditory mechanisms who cannot see, will pick up on the sound and at light speed will move in for the kill. So the silence is enforced. And it's a really interesting vision of the future. It is not, while it is certainly careful, it is not desperate. It's really interesting. So let's go to Krasinski's chart. And I'm going to talk about him as kind of a character and as a person. Okay. Now, if you know him from Jim in The Office, you'll know what his traits are in The Office. What were they? Well, they were funny, patient. He was really patient. You never really saw him blow his cork, right? You never saw him blow his cork at all. He loved Pam, was devoted to Pam. He was able to do two things at once. And even, here's where Krasinski to me is like his character, where he was really able to sell his character. Like, he left Pam and he had an affair with Quincy Jones's daughter, right? In that other office. But you never got the sense he was a scumbag for doing it. He did it because Pam was engaged and whatever. He was able to move between two people, but he always kind of had his integrity intact. That's not easy to do, by the way, whether it's in life or in a film character. That is not easy to do. But he managed to pull it off. He and Pam are kind of like, and mostly him, are like the pillars of The Office. Very funny, just as goofy as everybody else, but they're the pillars of The Office. And if you see or have seen the British version of The Office, in John Krasinski's character, it's kind of similar, but he does not have the same kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? To some degree, gravitas. Krasinski is very funny, but he manages to have has a gravitas. All right, let's go to his chart, and we're going to get into this. This is an interesting chart. Now, one of the things that I saw when I looked at his chart is, look at where all the planets are. I mean, they're at the bottom of the chart. Correct? They're down there at the bottom of the chart. The highest planet of his chart is Neptune. In the seventh, it's at the end of the sixth, ingressing into the seventh. Or we may as well call it the seventh because it's right there in the cusp. But everything else is below the horizon. Got Gemini ascendant, 22 degrees, midheaven in Aquarius, 10th house, Pisces, which is great for acting, by the way. That's a great house for acting with Pisces there. But look at him. He's got Mars in Leo, very good for acting. Am I right? Yes. Trine Neptune, really creative. That's a creative aspect. So Mars is the first planet we encounter in his chart. And it's in the third house, which means he can do a lot of things simultaneously. It's interesting, too, because I think he and Emily Blunt have kids together, and they're both like working actors and actresses. And, they're like making this thing work. And basically, I saw a brief interview. He says, well, the kids come first. So if she's doing a film, he's not. I think that's pretty much how it's working, or at least in this film, they did their first one together, and the kids were probably not that far away from them. Anyway, he's got that Mars trine to Neptune, which is very, very creative. You look down into his fourth house, and what does he have there? He's got Jupiter in the fourth house, True Node in the fourth house, Dark Moon Lilith in the fourth house, and Saturn in the fourth house. This is a fourth house kind of guy. Am I right? I mean, he really should be dwelling in the fourth house. That's where he's supposed to be in this lifetime. He's supposed to be at home and have a family, right? Maybe a working family because of Saturn down there. But then we go to his fifth house, and guess what? Well, he's got that Libra moon conjunct the sun right at the edge of the fifth house, and there's Pluto in the fifth house. Now, the fifth house is what? It's creativity, it's passion, it's pastime. It's ruled by what? Leo. And Leo there are two signs to me that really are, resonant with great actors, and it's Leo and Pisces. To me, those are the two greatest signs for acting. Right? Pisces can put on any kind of mask, Pisces can be anybody. And Leo, because Leo gets up on stage and, has the chutzpah to be an actor, wants to be loved and adored and respected. So what's happening here? How does a guy who has all these planets down at the bottom part of his chart, how are they getting up to other parts? How is he in the world? Well, the first thing that you can sort of hone in on is that his sun is at 27 degrees Libra, and it's in almost an exact trine with his midheaven. Okay? So through his creative ability and working with other people, by the way, he is very relationship based. Not only did he bring his wife, when his wife is an actress, Libra, fifth house, but if you look at the producer of the film, it's Michael Bay. And Krasinski was in a film that Michael Bay had directed, and it's about Benghazi. So he took that relationship that he created with Michael Bay and he was able to kind of fifth house this thing. right? And his sun goes right up to the midheaven. Sun and moon goes right up to the midheaven. So what does the world see with that trine? They're seeing his persona, right? And they're seeing his emotions. And he's got the sun moon conjunction, which is fairly rare, to be honest with you. And if you look at this, is what I think is really fascinating, is he's got his moon at the 26th degree, which means it is still balsamic. And I know some people will say, oh, that's a new moon. No, it's not a new moon. That moon is not a new moon until it moves past the sun. Okay? It is not a new moon. This is like the ultimate of the balsamic moon because it's right there, conjunct the sun in Libra. And what are some of the qualities that John, first of all, what does the balsamic moon have to do? The balsamic moon has to let go of things. For those of you out there that are new, the balsamic moon is the moon in the sign generally, or the same sign as the sun, or just before the sun, before it goes new, which is going to be after the sun. Okay. And in this case, it's still balsamic, 26 to 27. And people that have balsamic moons tend to be old souls. Now, Krasinski is going to look young for a long time because he has the Gemini ascendant. And people of Gemini rising tend to look youthful over the course of their lives. But I'm telling you right now, John Krasinski is an old soul. He's an old soul. People that have balsamic moons are old souls. They've been here before. The moon is getting ready to phase out. Let go, surrender. Let go, surrender. Now, in some cases, the letting go and the surrendering can be painful. And in other cases, it can be really profound. And what do you see with his character in The Office? He doesn't sweat the small stuff, right? And he's able to personify that. I think there's acting, and then I think there are core elements in a person that they're really good at. And his character, Jim, never sweated the small stuff. Never. And he was a prankster. You know, Leo tends to be a bit of a prankster. He has that. He has it in his chart. When you see him in this movie, it's the same thing. He doesn't sweat the, he's like a more serious version of Jim. You know, it's like if The Office had ended and the world had ended and Emily Blunt was really Pam, this is, I think, how Jim would be. It's the same kind of, sort of the patience and all that stuff, which I don't think you can fake. And the other thing, too, is I'm going to give a shout out to Cancerian people here. I think Cancerian people have gravitas. I've known a lot of Cancer people, and they are very soulful people. Okay. Every sign has its issues. Cancer has their issues sometimes. They're clingy. It's hard for them to let go. Whatever. Sometimes they can be really cheap. As a sign, Cancer is not always the most generous sign. I'm sorry to say, but it's true. Okay. But I'll tell you one thing Cancer people do have, and that's soul. And when you have planets in the fourth house, he's got some pretty good planets. Saturn's a bit tough in the fourth house. It's a bit tough. It's not in its own house there. And he may have had a strict father or strict mother in the fourth house. It depends. Sometimes the mother can be the father in the fourth, or sometimes Saturn in the fourth. The father is more maternal, but still there's, some limits with Saturn in the fourth house. And in fact, it squares Neptune. I think John Krasinski might be holding on to some pain with that Saturn-Neptune square. Be interesting to see what his childhood was like. But with Jupiter, True Node, and even Black Moon Lilith, this guy's got soul. That's Cancer's house. People that are Cancerian have gravitas. They have emotion. They have soul. He's got it. He's got it in the fourth house, and he's also deep, right? Well, why is that? Well, because Mr. Krasinski, he's got Mercury in the sign of, what is that? It looks like it's Scorpio, correct? Yeah. Let me just pass over here. What we got here? See, it's Mercury. Yeah, it's Mercury in Scorpio, and he's coming in at See, that's 18. So let's see this. Let's see, Venus. He's got Venus at 11, Scorpio, and Mercury, Scorpio, 19. And he was born in what, 70, 79. So he's got Pluto, Mercury. Hold on. Where's his Mercury now? Yeah, so he's got Pluto. Just want to make sure here. Yeah, he's got Pluto and Scorpio, right? Just want to make sure. I don't want to, because I'm not used to reading the astro theme charts. Just click on that aspect here. Yeah, it's 19 Scorpio. So he's got, when was he born? 79? So it looks like he's got a, just want to make sure. Oh, that's Uranus. My bad. He's got Pluto and Libra. Sorry. This is astro theme. I'm just looking at different symbols. I usually read off of astro themes. Yeah, he's got a Mercury-Uranus conjunction. Mercury-Uranus conjunction in Scorpio. Uranus and Scorpio. That's interesting. 6th house. That's working. And there's Venus in Scorpio. So he's working with his wife, with Venus in the 6th house. And intensely, right? Very intense. Anyway, part of fortune is right on the ascendant. And that another part about his chart that I wanted to bring up is not only does his sun trine the midheaven, but it's also in a kind of a wide sextile with his ascendant. So how he shows up in the world and how he shows up every day probably aren't that different. Maybe a little bit. But he also has Saturn squaring his ascendant. That's really interesting. Maybe that's a bit of the gravitas that we see, because he does seem a bit sad at times, right? Doesn't John Krasinski remind you of the eternally sad clown when you look at his face, right? You could just see like a clown, but he's a sad clown. I think that's Saturn squaring his ascendant. Let me check in with you in the chat room. So that Venus really is 5th. Libra, Cancer, 1st house. Not cheap, frugal. Think frugal. There you go. Frugal. I've noticed a lot of great actors have prominent Neptune placements. JK has his on his descendant, which means, of course, yeah. So he gets, think about this with John Krasinski. How do we really know him in his like acting? Like it was with him and Pam, right? It's with him and Pam. And he's done a lot of different movies. Like this is not his first movie. But when he was in relationship with Pam in The Office, that's when his acting really came out, you know? And so this film, I think, is with his wife, this is going to be really big. This is going to be a really, really big film. Let's go to Emily Blunt's chart, which is not exactly, well, it's a chart, but it's not the same as Krasinski's. So here's what I thought was quite interesting about Emily Blunt's chart. First of all, her sun is conjunct his south node in Pisces. So her sun is in his 10th house. And I thought about this. It's like, wow, this is really interesting. He's married somebody whose sun is on his south node, which, by the way, as an astrologer, I would not recommend that. You know, and it may be working for John Krasinski and Emily Blunt, but that's not really something that I would really recommend, to be quite honest with you. Her black moon Lilith is conjunct his midheaven. And that's also quite interesting. It's off by, I think, 6 degrees or 7 degrees. I thought that was interesting. But the one aspect that really grabbed me was her or is it was her, where's Libra in her chart? Okay, so her Libra is at 20, her Pluto is at Libra 29, which puts it right on his sun and right on his moon. So he's got a sun moon conjunction with her Pluto, which is like, so her Pluto is in his 5th house, which means that she would transform him. She transform his emotions, she'd transform his identity. And I think out of it, they've had kids together. That's a 5th house. It's a 5th house deal. And I believe her Saturn, if I'm not mistaken, at 4 degrees is 7 degrees off of her Venus. And Saturn Venus conjunctions in astrology are really important. To some degree, they're karmic. It's people have something to figure out together. They can provide structure and form for a relationship. So I can see why, that this is happening, like with Saturn Venus conjunction, Pluto on his sun. She's transforming him in a lot of ways. But she's at the top part of his chart. She's got Sun in Aquarius. She has Mercury in Aquarius, ninth house. It's a very different kind of chart. And what I found interesting about her chart is she has a Venus-Mars conjunction, which is out of sign. She has Venus in Aries at 0 degrees, and she has Mars in Pisces at 28 degrees. She's got a really unusual chart. And I don't think she has much Earth at all. In fact, what does she have? She's got Saturn in Scorpio, conjunct his Venus, Pluto in Libra, Uranus, Jupiter, Sag, Neptune 28 Sag, Mercury in Aquarius, Sun in Pisces, Mars, Venus, Mars in Pisces, Venus in Aries. There's no Earth here. So living with John Krasinski for her could be a really good thing. Why? Because he's holding down all the Earth with Virgo down in his 4th house. And it's probably allowed them to have a relationship in the family, allowed her to work. So this is a really interesting chart. And the Venus-Mars conjunction is fascinating because it's passion. It's very passionate, Venus-Mars conjunctions. And this is like really fiery. It's 2 degree separation and out of sign, right? So it's interesting. Again, Pisces is very creative. Mars and Pisces, actively creative and working with the masculine and the feminine. Of course, she's had a lot of films where she's been in sort of, relationship movies. There was one where she was with Tom Cruise, Oblivion, where they're on another planet. She's been in a fair amount of science fiction related movies. I think she was also in the something adjuster, was it time adjustment bureau. She was in that with Matt Damon, who is a Libra. But what's really fascinating about her and this chart is that basically within 2 weeks after this movie opening, Chiron conjuncted her natal Venus. Okay, so Chiron was transiting from Mars to Venus in her chart as this movie was opening. And Chiron's going to be on her Venus for the next 2 years. And there's a scene at the end of the movie. And I don't want to spoil it for you. You got to see the movie. And it is clearly a cinematic giveaway, a cinematic tell of Chiron and Pisces to Chiron and Aries. And if you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. Now, how's this movie going to affect Emily Blunt and her relationship with John Krasinski? I don't know. It's going to be interesting. It'll be interesting to see how the movie impacts her and impacts the relationship. Because the Chiron Venus conjunction could be really powerful. And, it's like, wow, we've achieved this kind of, think about their experience. They've done something that very few people have done. First of all, they found each other, they got married, they had kids, and they're both actors and actresses. And they made a movie together. And for all I know, they're still together after the movie. And it's not just any movie, right? It's a movie where, there's intimacy and looks and soulfulness. Warren Beatty made Dick Tracy with Annette Bening. Big deal, right? Other than the use of primary colors, nobody remembers Dick Tracy. People will remember this movie. And it's because, and maybe it's because of Krasinski's South Node in the 10th house in Pisces with her sun conjuncting it. Maybe that will be part of it. But also this Venus-Mars conjunction in Chiron. Now, will this film, kind of resemble an apotheosis of the marriage and the relationship, or we'll put it under more stress and pressure. I don't know. But it's going to be interesting to watch her over the next couple of years as Mars begins to transit across Chiron begins to transit across her natal Venus in Aries, 0 degrees. Fascinating chart. Clearly, John Krasinski is bringing the Earth to Emily Blunt's life. Go see the movie. Highly recommend it. I don't see a lot of movies. Was drawn to see this one, and I'll give you my final take on the film. You know, we deal in a world that is pretty dark and pretty bleak in a lot of ways. And a lot of people are very agitated and anxious, and we've got all this crap in our environment that we've got excitotoxins, we've got, 5G frequencies, we've got cell phones, we got GMO foods, you know the script, right? Which adds into this heightened sense of, being on the edge in a lot of cases. And also we're dealing with a lot of, distortion and chaos in our environment. A lot of people are, they're on the edge. I just saw another shooting thing tonight. By the way, you're going to hear about it tomorrow. I'll talk about it on tomorrow's show. I watched the news tonight. I watched ABC News, and I just got to tell you, I don't even recognize it anymore. I don't recognize the newscasters. I don't recognize the style. What I do recognize is the propaganda and the programming. That much is clear. We used to, I'm sounding like an old fuck now, but remember when we were younger, for those of you who are, kind of up around my age, like Sunday night newscasters, they had gravitas. They were there to read the news. Howard K. Smith. Remember that guy? Howard K. Smith. Harry Reasoner. Remember Harry Reasoner? Guy looked like he was 100 years old. Howard K. Smith looked like he never smiled a day in his life. Then we graduated to the Tom Brokaws, Peter Jennings. Even those guys had some gravitas, but I'm talking the old dudes. I was watching this guy tonight on ABC News. For all I know, he could have been a computer simulation. I swear to God. And I wouldn't be surprised if he was. Anyway, the thing about this movie is that it gives us, at least in my estimation, a snapshot or review into the future. And it is not necessarily a bad future. Let's put it that way. It is a future with a lot less people. That is true. And I'm not saying that that's going to happen, but I've had visions of a certain timeline with a lot less people. The world is a very, very different place. And it's not necessarily a bad place. It is not as dystopic as our cinema has programmed us to get into. Oh, by the way, our girl has where's her moon? 10 Cancer. She's got a Cancer moon. There's that gravitas. She's got a grand water trine. Sun, moon, Saturn. Emily Blunt's got some soul. Absolutely. Anyway, it provides us with an interesting glimpse into a future with less noise, less people, and ultimately staring down and facing our ultimate fears. Interesting movie. Go check it out. All right, let's just check in with the rest of you tonight, see how you're doing, what's going on. I have a soft spot. Peter Jennings, isn't he Canadian? He's a Canadian, right? I'm right past my return. I was obsessed too. Wow, glad I'm going to see it with my bag of confectionery. Quiet Place, THX. Yes, Canadian. Yeah, I saw Tom Brokaw one time in Atlanta. It was very funny. You talk about Chiron, as I have major Chiron life. About to have it. Return, my latest obsession. Been astrologically aware since 1960. Chiron is the real deal, man. Chiron is happening. I talked about this on one of my shows this week, and you look at what's going on in Korea. We're seeing Chiron in action with Korea. Chiron in Aries is happening in Korea. It's very interesting because if you look at Chiron, right, the pillars, the twin pillars of Chiron on Saturn and Uranus, and what did South Korea do? South Korea went the Saturnian route. Got in bed with America, corporations, money, all that stuff, right? That was Chiron and Saturn. And South Korea did it, or just Chiron in general. They did the Saturnian trip. And North Korea did what? The Iranian. FU, we're communist. It's the all one system. We're going to hang out with communist China. So what do we have there? We have the chirotic split between North and South Korea. And then they bring it together, wherever they will, hopefully. Walter Cronkite, by the way, hate to burst your bubble there, Maury. Walter Cronkite was not a good dude. I mean, he had the delivery, but Walter Cronkite used to go to the Bohemian Grove a lot. That's all you needed to know or need to know. Now, it's true. Nobody knew. Nobody knew who these people were. It all started with Edward R. Murrow, and now they're just script readers. That's all they are now. There's no. Anyway, the Tom Brokaw story. I was in Atlanta, and I was there for the Olympics. I was reading tarot cards at the Olympics, and it was the morning of the marathon. It happened, and I walked down to the place next to the Fox Theater. There was a cafe there, and I had my dog. My dog was traveling with me. I had my tea and I had my scone. I'm sitting there in front of the cafe next to the Fox Theater, and this limo rolls up. This guy pops out of the limo, and it's like, I know that guy. And it's Tom Brokaw. And you could tell he'd been partying all night. And he looks at me, and he knows that I know him. And he gave me that Tom Brokaw look and voice. Says, "Good morning." It's like, that was, again, not, another New World Order dude, total globalist, Illuminati guy. But in that day, in that morning, Tom Brokaw ran out of his limo. "Good morning," because he knew that I knew him. And he jumped back in with his coffee, and off he took. That was kind of funny. It was my Tom Brokaw story. Anyway, hey, let's get on out of here. I know a lot of you people need to get some rest, get some sleep. It's almost 10 o'clock here. Tom Brokaw bought and lived in the house I grew up in. Wow, how about that? How about that for synchronicity? Tom Brokaw bought and lived in the house I grew up in. Farah has Chiron conjunct Mars in aspect to every outer planet. Oh, Farah, you're going to have a ride, huh? You got Mars and Aries, Farah? At what? How many degrees? Good night, Heather. Thanks for chiming in. Say bye to Heather. Who sleeps? Emily. Yeah, good question. Good question. All right, I'm out here. Hey, thanks everybody for showing up. It's been a good little stream tonight, and I'll be back tomorrow morning. Try to untangle what happened in Nashville with the shooting at the Waffle House. What did I tell you? It's going to happen in workplaces next. Bam. There it is. Have a great night. And I'll catch you guys tomorrow for the 15 Minutes of Flame at 8 o'clock here, Central Standard Time. If not, go to my website, robertphoenix.com. I have an astrology course there if you want to learn more about astrology. And I've got a new post up on the movie, which I think you'll find at the very least interesting. All right. Good night. Good night. Blessings all.